Hey everyone, it's very good to see you and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about Diablo, but specifically the PlayStation console release of Diablo. I had come to learn about this looking up some fun co op games to play with another, and then I discovered, oh, they released it on PlayStation 1. That's really interesting. And this game does have an interesting history, and we'll talk a little bit about the development of it, the franchise as a whole, but also the PlayStation version. And to jump into that, Diablo at large, the original game was a concept by a game developer named David Brevik, and he had been inspired by RPGs, some naming Telengrad, and the Legend of Zelda series, of course. And at the time, RPGs were really based on this D&D concept of make a character, spend the first hour doing that alone and building their stats and coming up with a backstory, etc., etc. And funny enough, David had taken some cues from NHL, in '94 specifically, wherein you could just turn the game on, hit the start button, choose your team, and you're playing the game already. And that quick speed and pace is something David wanted to get into that RPG experience and kind of take the dungeon crawling aspects and some roguelite aspects and kind of put them into a game, so that one could just start having some action and beat the crap out of demons. And so that's where the idea for Diablo started. And I love the story of the name. David at one point in time lived around the Bay Area and near Mount Diablo specifically. And so, you think, oh, the devil, blah, blah, blah. But really, David's inspiration for the title of this game came from just living nearby a mountain thus named. So that's pretty interesting. And there's a couple other aspects I thought were intriguing about the original development of Diablo. The game was initially going to be a turn-based game, and as well feature a claymation style of art. Clay Fighters was a really popular franchise at the time, and so they wanted to go that direction, but ultimately changed it to the 3D isometric style that we know today. And I personally think that was a good idea, because could you imagine playing Diablo 4 in a claymation aesthetic if that's what the franchise was founded on? I can't see it in the 2020s. And it was really, really hard for the studio Condor at the time to pitch this game, because there was a lot of hesitancy to back RPGs in the late 90s, with publishers and studio houses saying, this is kind of a dead genre, we've moved on past this, and we're not looking to shop it. But with a little bit of work, and they pitched it to Blizzard. Blizzard was interested in taking it on, as they had just completed Warcraft and had a little studio time, lag time between kind of getting their next game going and then bringing this on. So it was just good timing, and it worked out really well. And Blizzard were the folks who really pitched the idea of, hey, let's bring this to a real-time combat style. And isometric style was kind of something Condor had, come into under Blizzard's wing as well. So, good decisions all around, and then went on to make this huge franchise that's known around the world as far as the gaming goes. Now, what is interesting is that Diablo on PlayStation 1 was actually published by Electronic Arts, as you can see down here. Blizzard sold the console rights to EA to develop this game, and another one too. I believe EA might have done Warcraft on the PlayStation 1 as well. And I really like the design of this game's art and the box. It's very colorful on the inside, and it looks like Diablo is kind of reaching out on the CD there, which I find to be pretty cool. And then here's them advertising Warcraft on the inside. And aside from that, things are pretty standard of the time. You get a nice little insert here. I actually have even the original registration code kind of tucked away in this booklet. Actually, it's still stapled in and rusting away as we speak. But it talks a little bit about the controls, gives us a little background on kind of what's happening. So the hero is returning to Tristram. There are demons pouring out of the cathedral, And basically, your task and goal is to, of course, go into that cathedral through its 16 or so floors and make your way to hell so that you can defeat Diablo. Overall, the story on the game is not too deep. You basically just kind of work through these floors. You'll meet people who have had experiences either in the cathedral or around the town and community that can fill you in on what's going on. And there's some dynamic aspects to the story too. Sometimes there will be somebody laying outside the cathedral who tells you about the butcher. And you'll have this mini boss who's very famously known, waiting for you a couple floors in. Or sometimes the town's well will be poisoned, and you'll have to make a little side adventure to go and cleanse that. But overall, the core story just comes down to everyone is being terrorized by these demons, and you have to get to the bottom, and you have to kill Diablo. And the story needed to be simple. I think it's great for an old concept game and a new concept to employ such a thing. And I think it sold pretty well as far as reception goes. The game initially came out and was a rave hit. There was a smaller demo version that was kind of released and circulated really easily called Diablo Spawn, which kind of gave players a character and a couple of the floors to explore and experience. And these all came to the fact that they projected to make maybe 100,000 sales, and it went on to sell 5 times, 6 times that. And so I think it's big, and that's probably the reason why they ultimately brought it to the PlayStation and made this version. But the story is pretty much unchanged here. It's simple and easygoing, and I think it's a great way to introduce this franchise and to build on it, which is what they've done pretty successfully, I would say, since the late 90s when this first came out. Then there are some aspects of the game, aesthetics-wise, that I can appreciate as well, even 20 years later. And some of that's probably nostalgia, but I really do love the soundtrack. There's a fantastic kind of lingering song that plays when you're in the town of Tristram. And as you go further down, you get these kind of war cry, battle sounds, and drum beats, and just some great music all around. I think as far as sound effects goes, the game is kind of par, especially on the PlayStation 1. It doesn't sound impressive in a lot of ways, but you know, if you're hitting something, it sounds like something's getting hit. Or if you're shooting a bow, it sounds like an arrow's flying away. And graphically, Electronic Arts did some interesting things with this game that are different from the PC version. One of those being that the game is zoomed in quite a bit, I believe 25% or so closer as far as the vision of the player. And this kind of does a couple things. It pixelates the game a bit more, so especially on a huge 55-inch TV, which 4K TV I'm playing on, that's definitely a lot more noticeable. However, I think I would imagine one of the reasons they did it for was performance and kind of leveraging the power of the PlayStation to the best that Electronic Arts could. But also, you do get a little more detail in terms of seeing the enemies and seeing your character. I think it kind of restricts your ability to see what's ahead in the environment, and especially when you have the overlay map on the screen, which a lot of people will play Diablo with. Can look a little clustered at times, though the style itself stays very true to the original. And there's some nice little added touches, such as now when you're in the town and you walk by the water, you'll see your character's reflection, or birds will fly across in the sky. And these were a couple observations I read when looking at some reviews online from back in around the time this game came out. And that's aptly fair to say. It's interesting what Electronic Arts did here. I think that when you play the original on PC, you get a better kind of visual experience, and I think the game's aged a lot better in that sense too. Though, all said, if you want to have just an experience of playing Diablo, I think you really get it here when you think about the design of the game from a sound and a visual aspect. It's still all there. But what's really big in these games and in dungeon crawlers is the gameplay, and especially the way it controls. I think one of the big questions I had when I first picked this up and I thought about playing it is, okay, on PC you have a whole keyboard and you have a mouse, and there's a lot you can do with those keys in order to get everything you need out of your character. How do they translate that to a controller? And they've done so pretty well, just to kind of take you through some of the controls, right? Shoulder buttons, L2, R2, help you kind of hotkey in spells or items and tools you're using, and L1 and R1 help you activate health and mana potions. So no more 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you can just hit L1 and R1. And one thing that's nice from a kind of quality of life aspect is they don't just need to be in your belt. They can also just be in your inventory. So as you get later into the game, you'll probably find yourself stocking your inventory full of potions so you can make it as far as possible before returning to town. And so now you can just spam the L1 and R1 buttons all day as you need them. And I found that to be very useful in this experience. But otherwise, since it is isometric and you're playing on like a diagonal plane, but you're using a controller kind of meant for a 3D or 2D space, the controls are kind of weird. Sometimes you gotta like do an upright to move straight, or up will take you a little to the left, or things like that. And so that does take a little time to get adjusted to. However, the controller's a pretty nice little layout, and they've simplified the design of the game so that you can navigate the world and do things very effectively. I think on the control side, where it does get kind of wonky is the UI for menus and systems is very dense, so to speak, and it does take a lot out of you when you have to reorder items in your inventory to fit things in, or you're trying to check out different equipment, etc. On the PC, you could just click and then you could move an item up to your inventory and then click again and it'll kind of swap them on and off. However, on the PlayStation 1 version, when you put something on your inventory, it takes the other item and automatically moves it for you. Sometimes you'll find yourself in a circumstance where maybe you want to equip a bow, but you had a sword and shield on, and so now you can't do it because your inventory is stocked up. So then you have to figure out, okay, how do I reorganize my inventory? And you're trying to move things around. It can get cumbersome pretty quick in a lot of ways, and I found myself spending much more time than expected on navigating and using these menus and systems in order to play the game. So I would say on the PC side, you do get a better experience overall. However, it's not bad here. I think what really holds it back is there is a lot of time lag between, opening menus, closing them, saving and loading the game, and teleporting to and from town. I mean, each loading screen will give you a solid minute of wait time at least. And so when you think about, okay, I need to go to town, you go to town, that's a minute, right? You go downtown, you sell equipment, the equipment's all in these menu systems. It doesn't show you pictures and you can't actually see your inventory, so you're looking at the text and trying to make sure you're selling the right things, and you're exiting those, and that's taking 5-10 seconds here or there, and maybe you're playing the game with someone else and they're doing the same, and now you're saving and it's taking another minute or two, and then you go in through the portal and that's another minute or two, and that time really adds up. And so there's a lot of downtime playing this on the PS1 that I didn't expect to be there. However, I still found the game enjoyable. It's just this took away from my ability to enjoy the things that are fun about it. And so we can talk about those, right? Which is the dungeon crawling aspects, the looting and killing the demons and making your way down to the bottom. When we think about those angles of the game, it is still very enjoyable, and you have that Diablo experience. Very traditionally, you're just walking around and exploring the floor. You'll find mobs and spawns, and you just basically kill them. You pick their loot up, you see what you got. Maybe you found something cool or not, and you go sell it. You level up occasionally. And these aspects are pretty fun in the game. One thing I liked is that the character design in Diablo allows you to be very flexible with who your character is. So you could choose the rogue, or you can choose the warrior or the sorcerer, but that doesn't mean they're going to be the rogue, the warrior, or the sorcerer. You can kind of very simply customize them for the build that you're looking for, and it's something you're going to want to do because as you get further into this version of the game, and this is on the PC as well, but it was very evident in the PS1, the mobs become much more difficult to keep up with. So I started as a warrior class, but you're going to very quickly need to employ spells or bows, because you're going to run across these crazy goat creatures and dog creatures as you get further down that will spit acid at you, shoot spells at you, arrows at you, and when you get close, they sprint away. There's absolutely no way you can catch them. And so you have to employ a ranged class, and so it's good that there is this flexibility available. Now, one thing that does become difficult about that is if you play it in co-op. So you can play the entire PS1 version of Diablo with another person, which I found to be one of the most appealing aspects of buying and enjoying this version of the game. However, there are some downsides still. One of those being friendly fire. So if you're a melee character and you have a ranged teammate and you're running in and you're attacking enemies, to simplify the design of the game for the controller, they have made all spells and all arrows auto aim. So you'll highlight a character and you'll see a little red or blue silhouette around them, and that shows that you're targeting them. The problem with auto aim when you have a melee character on your team is that there's friendly fire. So if someone's behind you and they're shooting arrows, they might hit your character, which is going to do a lot of damage really quick. And when you're trying to manage your health and there's already all these enemies everywhere, there becomes a lot of conversations about strategic positioning and how you're playing, going around a corner and fighting the demons, etc. And I think these things kind of take away from the gameplay experience of just being able to run around, hack and slash. And Diablo is, it's a 90s game in core and in its essence, and that goes for its difficulty too. It's a lot tougher to manage these engagements, and I would say that the PlayStation version heightens the stress of that. And what becomes even more stressful is kind of what I was mentioning with loading times, etc. earlier. You'll find yourself in a situation where there's a crazy mob, and so you save the game before you go and fight them, and then you die or whatnot, you can reload. But of course the loading is taking a minute or two, and so you can really get bogged down. When you get to the lower levels and floors, you're going to find yourself spending an hour or two just clearing a single floor, which takes a lot of time, and much of that being waiting around, waiting for things to load, waiting for things to go to town and to open your menus and check your menus, etc., and change your equipment. And so when you get to kind of the final few floors, you're going to find yourself finding the game a little tedious and drawn out. And for all the fun it is, even if you've maxed out your character, you're going to get that difficulty you would expect in Diablo. Bogged down with the delay times, it bogged it down with, again, this experience of chasing monsters that won't die, you can't catch them, etc. And so, again, I enjoyed it, but proceed with caution if you play the PlayStation 1 version, just because you are going to find yourself in that experience. And maybe part of that is because I played with somebody else, and so the monsters are a little more difficult, etc. Not too sure. But I did have an overall enjoyable time, and especially having nostalgia for the game meant that I could enjoy it in a way that was kind of fogged, rose-tinted, I guess you would say. So I had a lot of fun. And in a replayability sense, I mean, it's Diablo. I mean, there's not much more to say. The game's very replayable and fun. I do think that if I was to go back and play the game again, it would be on the PC version, or having learned all that I have on the PlayStation version with like a jacked sorcerer who has super powerful spells, etc., because I feel like that's the real way I would be able to tackle the mobs further down in the game. But very replayable, very fun. It's always exciting to just run through, kill demons, get loot, check it out, see what you find. That loop itself is replayable in its essence, so you bring the whole game into picture, and it's fun. And the ending is rewarding in a sense. I think the first time I beat it many years ago, my expectations were somewhat subverted, but they really kind of set up Diablo 2 nice, and I think in an intriguing way, and in a way that I wouldn't have anticipated when I first played this as a kid. So overall, Diablo, it's a classic. It's a great, phenomenal game. This version of it is very interesting from the lens of it's published by Electronic Arts. They did a lot of interesting things with it, and I think it's an enjoyable and exciting experience to just give a try. Though if you're at home and you're playing on your computer and you're emulating it as opposed to buying it for your PlayStation, there'd be not much of a reason not to go to wherever you can buy Diablo these days that's compatible for Windows 10 or whatnot, Windows 11, and check it out that way. I think that would be the core experience you'd want to have if I was to recommend you to play it for the first time. But for people returning, of course, this is definitely worth checking out, and I think you should. And so overall, I'm curious, what do you think about Diablo? I hope you like that franchise. I'm a big fan of it, especially the second game is so good. And outside of that, appreciate you watching the video, and if you liked it, please like it and subscribe. It would be great to have you around in the future for more game reviews. But until then, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and again, thanks for tuning in. Take care.